Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been doing a series of webinars for over a year now, and it's just so exciting to be able to bring this information to you at your own convenience, where you can watch it on the Surefoot Equine YouTube channel and just be able to take advantage of all the incredible guests that I've had. It's been really an amazing journey so far to have some of the incredible people that have joined me and the knowledge that they've shared. And the feedback that I'm getting from you, the audience, is really amazing. And I so appreciate hearing from you and knowing that you appreciate the webinars. It's always great if you want to leave a comment after you've watched them. You can just type, whether you liked it or not. And if you have anybody that you want me to have as a guest, just send me an email at wendy@wendymurdoch.com. We are tracking a bunch of people. Sometimes it takes me a little while to wrangle them, but I do throw my lasso out and try to bring them in. Today, my guest is DeEtte Hillman, and she's from Days End Farm. And she's here today to talk to us about some of the things we might not know about horse rescue, that it's just really important to have an understanding of what's going on in that world. So thank you, DeEtte, so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be back, Wendy. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So please give everybody a little bit of your background, what you do at Days End Farm. I know that we did a webinar where we talked about that, but just in case someone hasn't seen that webinar.
Sure, absolutely. I'm the Equine Programs Director for Days End Farm Horse Rescue. Specifically, we're located in Central Maryland. We are in our 32nd year of operations. Working to assist animal control and humane agencies throughout Maryland, bordering states, and national organizations with the seizure, impoundment, rehabilitation, and criminal support with equine-related abuse and neglect cases. So we're rehabilitation, retraining, and adoption, volunteer, community outreach, education. So we're committed and passionate about helping the horse and those who are responsible and mandated to intervene on their behalf when they find themselves in a hard, tough situation.
Right. And so since our last webinar, I came out to Days End Farm and met
you. Have, yes.
It was so much fun. And I met your staff, who was delightful, and just saw the scope of your facility, which if one has not been there, it's hard to believe exactly how involved in this whole area of equine rescue is, and what they're doing at Days End, and the amazing stories they have for all the horses that have been adopted. And it's just really, it was amazing to go there and see what you're doing and what your plans are and how you're expanding and how you're affecting probably internationally, but certainly nationally, to really be for the horse's welfare, and how important it is that there is interface with the professionals, the police, the people that are usually the first responders to that neglect case, and educating them so that they know what to do, because it's a complicated deal.
It really is, and it's awareness. It starts with awareness, and then it starts with building in the steps of how you can make an impact, how you can help. And it's education, it's training and equipping those who find themselves in that field, in that profession. Dogs and cats they're family to us. They live in our houses, sleep in our beds. I mean, run around in your boxes under your
all the time. They're in my boxes.
So they're a little more mainstream to us. Our learning and understanding what their needs are and how to take care of them as they need us to are a little more ingrained in us. Yeah, there's formal learning and teaching available, but you have this animal, this equi that is of its own species and has its own unique needs, and the law is there written for them on their behalf, but comprehending and understanding and interpreting the law based on the horse's needs and requirements is oftentimes a gap for the animal welfare professionals. And Days End was founded 32 years ago with the mission and purpose to assist those professionals. And it's been a private goal of ours to work ourselves out of a job. you know,
Yeah.
through education and outreach and training? And can we reduce the cases and the needs for horses to come into rescue? And my tenure with Days End goes back to 2003 as a volunteer, working with the horses and other volunteers, and then staff. I became staff a few years later. And my experience with Days End has not really seen a decline in the equine related needs. There's been some changes and shifts in maybe the whys behind the horses finding themselves in a situation where intervention is needed, and the numbers of horses that need to come in at one time versus where it was 20, 30 years ago. So there's been some trend change, but the need has not gone away for education and training and learning. And so what I have prepared for you today is a class that I actually teach pretty frequently here at the farm. I teach it to, you know, our volunteers, on board members, public visitors to the farm. It helps, it goes right to the core of our mission, and it kind of helps people understand where DEFHR fits, and Days End Farm Horse Rescue is DEFHR, so I'll refer to us as DEFHR. Where we fit in that legal due process, and how our resources are used not only to save the life of the horse, but also further equip the professionals in the work that they're doing. So it's a nice opportunity to be able to share it on this platform, Wendy. This is probably the broadest platform I've had to teach this topic. So I thank you for the opportunity.
You know, there's a wonderful book that was written by a professor at University of Virginia, and it's called Cradle to Cradle. And the whole concept behind it is that you think about what is going to happen to the product at the end of its life when you make it. You know, because you think about all the products that we get that have plastic wrap, or they're, you know, plastic doesn't recycle, it downcycles, and we don't think about where that's going to wind up. In a way, what we're looking at here is, if you're going to take on the responsibility of a horse, it's important to think about cradle to cradle, from the time you get it till the time that horse is no longer with you in whatever means, but certainly at the end of its life, or if you get in trouble financially or otherwise, what's going to happen to that horse? You know, and I think that that's something that a lot of people don't think about when they become a horse owner. They're just all excited about getting a horse, but not everybody understands the responsibility, the cost, the time, and then they wind up in a situation that they've never intended to be in.
Yes.
But the circumstances have brought them there because there wasn't that consideration of what does it mean to own a horse?
Yes, absolutely. And there is an equine industry that is a big component to this conversation about equine welfare. My horse is my best friend. I don't view him as an object that is bringing me a monetary value. I don't compete. I'm not out there earning points. I'm not pinning. He's here because I'm not complete without him. And we enjoy trail rides, and you got a chance to meet him. I mean,
yeah, he's cool.
Lovely animal. Yeah. But there is an industry that, you know, this animal brings about a monetary value to people. Livelihoods are made, and, you know, in conjunction with love and care and respect for them. So it gets dicey, and it can get challenging when you're looking at law, and what it requires of an owner of an equine, which by law is classified as a livestock, not a companion animal. It's not in the same category as your dogs and your cats are. This is a livestock animal that has different standards of care. But the horse industry also is filled with very knowledgeable and experienced horse people, and horse owners and equine equestrians we're well known for being, you know, educated, knowledgeable, opinionated, and dare I say judgmental. And I mean, I've been a horse owner since the age of 12, so I'm in the crowd. I'm right in there with everybody else. So if I'm calling a horse owner out, I'm calling myself out at the same time. But it's oftentimes can be challenging to even have a conversation over the needs of a horse from a legal standpoint with an owner who might have their own opinions and judgments and an evaluation of what this horse needs. So equipping these officers to have a educated, knowledgeable conversation is a very big part of what we do.
Right. And just to remind people that you told me in our last webinar that you worked for the Humane Society and had the responsibility of supervising a whole bunch of people that had to go out and have I got it right?
Yes.
Do equine rescue. So you know it from not just the side of being the receiver, but also
Correct.
the side of being the one who had to.
Correct. I was a licensed humane investigator for equine for the state of Illinois. I am a certified equine investigator through the Colorado State University. And then as the shelter manager for the Humane Society of Central Illinois, I was managing a team of humane investigators that were both for small and livestock animals. So correct, I have a background in that. But to be fair, I want to make sure that your audiences understand I am not an attorney. I don't hold a legal degree. And I have, a lifetime of experience in equine and some professional experience that have brought me to the position where I am now. So I can speak from what I know, what I've been trained, what I've learned, what I've experienced. But based on questions and feedback, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to defer to those who are the true professionals in this industry. And every law and every process is different from where we're located here in Maryland to where you are in Virginia, Pennsylvania. Each state has its own legal basis for things. And I always encourage the audience when I speak about this to really investigate on your own what your state and local laws are as it pertains to equine welfare. Because if there is a concern that you have or see or observe or a problem, being equipped and ready to respond is the first step for help getting to those horses. So I'm ready to jump into the.
Let's do it.
Are you good? All right. I didn't. If there's any
If
questions.
anybody has any questions, just put it in the chat of the Q&A, and then where I see it's appropriate, I'll ask yet. And yeah.
So I am going to call myself out as a noob when it comes to sharing screens.
Look at that, you did it perfectly. Can't say that anymore.
Yeah, I have to give creds to my coworkers who unfortunately have to suffer with my trial and errors on this. And I was actually practicing before we got on today, Wendy. I was hoping to get it right.
Yep. Start your show from the beginning, and it'll zoom. We're seeing presenters. We should only see one slide at a time. So we're looking at,
now. What does that mean? Display settings.
Let's see. Swap presenter. Yeah, let's try that. There, yeah.
Go. Wow. All right.
I am impressed.
Yay. All right. I'm learning skill sets here. Okay, very good. So as I've said, this is a presentation I have given to many. I did do some tweaking. I am open if I'm mostly experienced with having a live audience and being able to read the impact and hear and engage with them. So Wendy, please interrupt if someone's got a question.
Absolutely.
It's meant to be conversational. I'll just flow through. There might be some information I just kind of go through quickly, but ultimately what I'm hoping to accomplish today is to give your listeners an overview of what the legal process is for Days End and the state of Maryland as it relates to equine neglect and cruelty concerns, seizures, rehabilitation, and criminal support. It goes into a little more detail even about what we do as an organization to support those agencies. And then kind of peppered in the presentation are some case studies and information and outcome. So we're just hoping to be able to accomplish that today.
Okay.
All right, so it really does begin with a phone call, a conversation. Most people, you know, in the end, when you see the news splashed across evening news that there was, you know, a large horse neglect case out of Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, and it's in newspapers, it's online. I always go back. I am always interested to learn about how it started, who made that call, who contacted the local agencies. It could be family members, it could be neighbors, it could be a utility worker, it could be anybody in the community who's making an observation or having an observation that something just isn't quite right. It's that gut feeling like I don't like what I'm seeing, or I'm afraid of what I'm seeing, or just I need to make a call. And so oftentimes for us, that phone call comes here. People will call us first and say, you know, I've been driving by this farm for 2 years, and the last 6 months or so, I've not noticed food. I've not noticed the water being filled. The horses seem to be losing weight or condition. You know, what do I do? And having that conversation and being willing to direct them to where they need to go. And oftentimes the conditions and what they're observing can be related to the horse's environment. It could be the condition of the horse themselves. Maybe they're seeing a horse being physically harmed, or it can just be passage of time where things are just degrading and changing a little bit. Exigent or emergent situations oftentimes happen with horses being down in fields or real thin, you know, rack of bones, skeleton type of thing that people get concerned about. So that's where it starts. And then, you know, examples of that, again, could be this type of observation. These are real pictures from real cases where observations were made. This was a water source that the passerby was witnessing as the only water source to a herd of horses. You know, the little one, yeah, we've got some big round bales, but her condition's really poor. You see food source, but you see a very poor condition animal. And so that's reason for concern. And then, you know, the other picture speaks for itself with the condition of that horse's hooves.
You showed me those hooves.
Yes.
And that I took pictures because I had never seen anything like it ever.
You held them. Yeah.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. That tactile learning is amazing. You'll never forget it.
No.
Never.
Just
yeah.
like, wow.
So who's the call? Every county, every community has an agency that's mandated by law to uphold the animal welfare laws of that area. And it can be an animal control facility, a municipal facility that's funded and supported by the local government. It could be a humane society that is a 501c3 nonprofit independent organization, but then has a contract with the county for upholding the law and enforcing the law. Sheriff's office, departments, law enforcement. State of Pennsylvania has an animal welfare arm of their state police. So if there's a animal concern in the state of Pennsylvania, you will call the state troopers to come in and assist. Information you're providing is hopefully the address and location of where it is and you're observing the concern. If there's been amount of time that you have observed it, provide that timeline, give as much information about what you see, what your concerns are, animal's condition, description of the property, location of the property, and if you have owner information or responsible party information, that information can all be used to aid the officers in making that first connect. In the state of Maryland, you are not required to leave your name or identification when you are calling in a concern. It can be anonymous. When I was an investigator for the state of Illinois, you were required to leave your name and contact.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that that was a concern and turned a lot of people away from leaving that information behind. Yeah.
Has it changed now that everybody has smartphones from what it used to be like? I mean, because we can all snap a picture now or take a little video, whereas before,
Absolutely.
just a report, it was just a phone call of I've seen something.
Absolutely. Good point. I mean, even 5 years ago, Wendy, I would take a phone call from a concerned person. And I was writing down descriptions of what they were saying. And today that same call can come in and they'll be like, hey, I just took a video or I just took a picture. Can I text it to you and I'll show it to you right now? So absolutely, it's real time.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you need to go and investigate every call, but sometimes you can look at a picture and go, this is a horse sleeping versus a dead horse.
Absolutely. Although I will not tell people to not call, even if it's a sleeping horse, even if it turns out, the old guy is enjoying a nice sunny afternoon, make the call. If your gut is telling you something's off and something's not right, there's no harm in that. And ultimately, understanding due process, the first thing that these officers need to uphold are the civil rights of the owner of the property. This is, that's the higher law at play here. They need to follow the law first and foremost, which includes the rights of the owner. The rights that our Fourth Amendment puts in about protection of privacy and not having your property invaded without legal due process. So,
because I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh, if I report that, I don't want to get them in trouble, but I want like there's that feeling of, or maybe I shouldn't call, maybe it's not that bad, but
or I'm going to get in trouble. They'll know it's me. If I just met this person to buy some hay, and he has some skinny horses in the back of his barn that I saw. I just left there. It was really upsetting. But if I call animal control and they go out, he's going to know it was me because I was just there.
Right.
He's got my name.
And the other thing is that, you might have the person that says, I don't want to waste the officer's time. They have more important things to do. This really probably wasn't that bad, because if you make a call, somebody has to go.
Correct. Right? And they do. Yes. I can confidently say in the state of Maryland, that phone call is enough to start the process of an officer knocking on a door to have a conversation with an owner. It's not about busting into barns, opening doors, or even going through a fence gate. It is about driving onto someone's property, knocking on the door and having a conversation. Okay. And so it can feel scary. It can have a feeling of vulnerability or guilt to be the one making the call. But ultimately, if there's nothing wrong and what's found is sufficient and okay, then there is no harm done. I've actually spoken to owners who have had animal control knock on their door for a concern, and their 35, 40-year-old horse who has no teeth, declining in condition, under veterinary care, being fed 8 times a day, and say they're okay with people calling. Of course, the passerby doesn't understand the circumstances, but I would much rather them call out a concern than not. So right. I've spoken to people, and this is the other fact that can sometimes come a part of that conversation is if there is that 35 to 40-year-old horse declining in condition under veterinary care, and the agency's been out multiple times, they know the relationship, they already have the history, they might be able to have that, share that understanding with the caller.
Right.
That can happen
Right.
too. Yep, thank you for reporting it. We're taking notes. I'll let you know that our officers were there 2 weeks ago. The horse is under veterinary care, and, you know, but thank you for calling. So it can truly turn out to be that, or it could turn out to be something that needs action
Attention. Yeah.
plans and something put in place to help the horses. So that's really, when the agents are arriving, they're really looking for the violations as it pertains to the animal welfare laws of your community. What the law says about what an animal is and what cruelty is, and what's a neglect misdemeanor, what's a felony aggravated, is all spelled out for them. And ultimately, they're looking at the law and what the law is guiding them to assess and evaluate. To further aid officers and agencies, Maryland Horse Council put together a minimum standards of care guideline document 20 some years ago. And to their credit, they took what the Maryland law interpreted. And when I say Maryland law, and I made notes to it, it has to do with the Article 27, Section 59, about what the law says the horse needs, which are nutritious food in sufficient quantity, proper drink, air, shelter, necessary veterinary care, and space. That's what the law says. But as it pertains to the species, what does nutritious food in sufficient quantity mean? So they further defined that for owners, number one. Number two, officers and agents, state's attorney's offices, and even judges. This is a document that can go right into trial to help them interpret what evidence was gathered as it pertains to the definition of the law and the minimum standards. And so this is a very valuable tool to carry on as education and guide. And ultimately, this is what the officers are looking for violations of. Their first and primary objective is really to fix whatever problems or issues there are in there at the property with the owner. It's not about seizing property. It's not about removing people's horses. It's about what changes can be made, what actions need to be taken to help this animal. So that's their first and primary goal. And if we as citizens appreciate that and know that, then we might be a little more comfortable in making that phone call. So if they show up at the scene and they see clear evidence signs of, you know, minimum standards of care not being provided, or, you know, very clear issues or problems, that's when the documentation starts. And the due process requires them to follow the letter of the law and what they're interpreting and how they're documenting. Sometimes and oftentimes this is when I'll get a phone call from an agent who's on scene needing help interpreting what he is witnessing. We have had, you said it, social media or, you know, smartphones, send me a picture. I can help give you a general idea of what that body condition score range is, or yes, those feet are in need of a trim, or, that food source doesn't look to be of great quality, but there's some recommendations or consultation. If things become apparent to the officer that the care and the standards are very low, or there's some concerns, they need to get the veterinarian involved at this point. The officers are not experts in equine care and management. The veterinarian is. And having a vet on scene to evaluate and assess the horse's condition, as well as make recommendations for what is called compliance orders, have the horse's fecal performed and deworm the horse, have a dental performed, vaccinate the horse, increase the feed or change the feed type, provide free choice hay, you know, scrub that water bucket and have potable water available to this horse 24/7. Those are the types of details that can come into a compliance order left with the owner, that then requires follow-up by the officer and the owner to take action to make corrections to. But it's ultimately that veterinarian that is providing the guidance to the owner for the well-being of that horse.
So if we were to take the pony with the curled hooves as an
Yes.
example, someone saw that this horse had not had its feet trimmed in, I don't even know how long it takes for them to grow like that. So they then made a phone call to the animal control. Animal control then sent an officer out to evaluate the situation.
Yep.
They looked at the condition in which he was living, and they looked at the condition of his feet and determined that they needed a veterinarian to come in and make a determination.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yep. Very succinct.
I mean, I think the point here is that, you know, how do I say this? As a horse owner, I am completely unaware of these kinds of steps because I've never been in this situation, nor have I experienced situations where there's been that kind of neglect. And so I think that while we hope we never have to deal with that, it's really important to know the steps in case we do.
Absolutely. And ultimately, the duties and responsibilities of the agencies that are out that are making that call, that you're calling. I have the privilege of working closely with these officers, and they are some of the most caring, kind-hearted, animal-loving people that you can meet. You know, talk about a tough job, and having very briefly been in that industry myself, you know, their motivations and reasons for going out on that call is because they care and love the animals as well, and they want what's best for them. So it really is I mean, it's a legal process, but it's executed by some very passionate, caring, kind people. So if they find themselves in a situation where either that the owner's non-compliant, they're not following the directions provided in the timeline in which they're being provided, then that's grounds for that officer to request a seizure warrant and remove the animals at that point and get them off the property and into protective care and custody. That can also happen in exigent circumstances where if that officer feels as if this horse's very life or well-being is at stake, if they would leave that property, that there was a chance that animal could die or its condition decline to a exigent circumstance, then they can go for an exigent circumstance type of a warrant to enable them to be able to seize those horses immediately.
What does exigent, I can't say it, exigent mean?
Just think of it as high danger. Exigent means this horse's very life is at stake. It's at risk of dying within hours, or and I hope I'm being correct if I had my friends in my pocket, but for them to leave the property is for them to close out that investigation, and they would need reason and cause to go back. And so there are officers who have seized horses because they were afraid for them to leave the property, that those horses could possibly die between then and the next time that they could possibly get on the property.
Got it.
So it is a real life and death situation, this exigent circumstance, whether that's a horse starving to death or it's caught up in a high tensile wire and it's bleeding out of an artery and it needs immediate veterinary care and needs to be removed. Those to me are that life-threatening circumstance. So that can certainly happen. Here's an example of a case for a local county. It wasn't that long ago for DEFHR. A local utility office worker was at a farm and filling up their propane tank. He said that typically the barn doors were closed. The propane tank was behind a barn and typically the doors were closed. He'd been there, going there for years. And this day the barn door was open and he took a peek inside and this is what he saw.
Wow.
He had no idea that this was the circumstances that these horses were in all these years. He didn't even know there were horses in this barn.
Wow.
Prompted him to call the local humane officer agency. And again, based on that concern, they were out on scene. And once the officer was there and witnessed for herself what was going on, then she employed the veterinarian. So she had enough discovery walking in that barn and having a conversation with the owner to know that she needed a vet on scene. And so the vet was called out that day. And then based on his assessment and recommendation, which is required by Maryland law, in order to receive a seizure warrant, you need a recommendation by a veterinarian. And that seizure was issued by a judge and signed by a judge and executed. That's when we get the phone call. Sometimes the judge, sometimes the officers call me and say, listen, we're working on a case, investigating a case. I've issued compliance orders. I've given X amount of time for the owner to make the changes. If they're non-compliant, we will be going for a seizure. That's rare, but it does happen. Oftentimes, if not the majority of the times, there is an exigent circumstance and they're calling me saying, we just got on scene. We have the vet, we have the warrant. How soon can your team get here? So.
Wow. So I was going to ask you what percentage was exigent, what percentage is kind of going and coming back and not seeing compliance, but it sounds like the majority are exigent.
It's hard to know because
you're not called in until that point of
seizures don't happen because of compliance, right?
Oh, right.
So
You're not gonna get population.
yeah, that would be a really good question to have answered from some of the agencies themselves, to say how many of your equine related cases actually resolve because the owner is able to be compliant.
Right. That would be an interesting question to ask. One would hope that if there was something, people would comply, but obviously in this case, that was not what happened.
This was not what happened. No, this was a situation where compliance was not even given. It was exigent. This horse alone's condition required immediate care. And it's the law is set up to be able to provide the facility such as DEFHR the ability to take in these horses that are still custody of the owner. This is a legal seizure of your property, but in our protective care and custody, we can provide that immediate care and veterinary care and treatment necessary in an attempt to save its life. And so that's where, Days End physically gets involved. That's when we're all in.
Okay, so the warrant's been issued, it's now executed, they give you a phone call, and then we show up.
Yeah, we show up.
You do all the transportation of these horses.
We do. Most counties do not have their own resources and trucks and trailers. Most counties' personnel are not trained in equine handling. And if you're a horse person, you know how fun loading can be, and the skills that our team has to be able to execute removal and transport of horses that might not have been touched ever, or that are so weak they can barely walk, or have feet like this she's literally slipping and sliding. The bottom of those feet are like skis, and that's a concrete floor. This poor mare could have broken her leg just getting from her stall to the trailer. So yes, our team is specially trained to be able to come in, assess the situation. You got a chance to meet Sarah Strauss, who is our head trainer. I have to give her so much credit in these situations. she's my heavy. I lean on her to walk through and look at these horses and identify who they are and where they are and what they are. Do we have a stallion? Do we have a pregnant mare? Do we have a mare and a foal? Do we have a senior horse? Do we have, 3 horses in one paddock together? Do we have 2 in another? And she makes the determination of what horses are put on the trailer when and with who, and leads the team from that standpoint. So I work with the animal control agency that's there. I work directly with case information, all of those paperwork documents that need to happen, speak with the vet, and then Sarah and her team will go and start haltering horses, catching out horses. Oftentimes this process, we're also documenting right there on the scene along with the agencies. We're taking photographs, writing down markings, conditions, identifications, and making that proper paperwork trail, chain of evidence is what it's called, right there on scene, because everything that we do to and for these horses ultimately ends up in the hands of the state's attorney's office. And that all needs to be succinct with animal control. So there's a lot of details on the scene. Sometimes, we pull in and they literally like, thank God that Days End's here. They're all yours. They step back and say, thank you for coming and, have at it. And other times we are one of several agencies. We've had some cases get so big that, Days End is a part of other agencies involved, where we're working together as an agency team. So
okay, this brings up a lot of questions. One is, how many people do you send out typically on a call?
4 to 5 typically. Even for just one horse, we never know what scenario we're going to enter into and what type of behavior or health issue we're going to have with that animal. So the minimum I'll go is 3, but our standards 4 or 5. The more the horses, the more resources I need. So right. Multiple trucks, multiple trailers. We employ volunteers who are signed up and trained and a part of my emergency response team. They're approved and trained and educated in this process. I can call them and they can show up with their trucks and trailers, or they can be a part of our team riding with us. But it's a team of volunteers and staff.
Right, because if you go in as a barn of 20 horses, you're going to need a lot of equipment.
We do. And officers so referencing back to our equine cruelty investigator series that we offer, we provide on-site, hands-on training with horses for these officers. And that's really paid off for us. We've been on scenes where we have a herd of feral horses and we are doing large capture techniques with ropes and panels and corrals and chute systems and round pens and trucks and trailers pulling up to to chute systems, and with officers going through that training and actually practicing it here with us and our staff, man, they become a part of our team and become really valuable to us. So yeah, the training really does pay off in the end.
With a horse like this, someone's asked, how do you get it in the trailer?
Very, very carefully. Honest to goodness. This poor mare, if you see our trailer on the right there, it was a pretty big step up from.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah, it's not unknown to be able to physically pick those feet up for her, bring her up to the trailer and lift up that foot so she can get her hoof past the bottom of the trailer to prevent her from hooking onto it and tripping into the trailer. Her biggest problem was she literally had no traction under those feet. Even in a fully thick bedded stall, this mare could not move without swaying and falling. And so she required immediate vet care. Our vet on this examination took those feet off and started repairing and creating a foot for her to stand on from the start. Like
before she ever got in the trailer, or
just as she got to the farm. That was her.
Okay.
Like there was no waiting for the farrier. Nope, there's no waiting for the farrier.
No, but I mean, do you ever have to do something on site where you're acquiring the horse?
Yes, absolutely. So Quest, whose feet were 3 feet long that you held in your hands, required a veterinarian and a farrier on the scene. The horse was sedated, laid down, and together the professionals removed his feet. There was no way we would have been able to transport that horse.
Right.
Yep. So yes, for wounds or exigent circumstances, sometimes the vet needs to provide emergent treatment on scene. Again, all that gets documented, all that gets tracked, all that gets provided as chain of evidence. So this mare was a risky transport.
Yeah.
Simply because of the condition of her feet. Yep. And we have had horses go down on the trailer and transport, whether be out of weakness or this type of thing. Yes.
Yep.
So this is just a slide that's giving credit to the law, the criminal law that gives Days End the legal right to be able to care for these horses. We don't legally own them. Custody has not been transferred to us. But I can call in a vet and have the horses examined. I can vaccinate them. I can provide dental care, deworming protocol, refeeding protocols, wound treatment and care. What I cannot do is in any way physically, permanently alter them. If there's a wolf tooth that needs to be pulled, we cannot pull it. If it's a stallion and castration can't be provided, none of that can be done to permanently alter that animal under this law, but we are permitted to go ahead and provide all the others that I described.
So how often do you wind up with a stallion coming into your facility?
Often. Often, and oftentimes, sadly, we don't know. The phone call that comes from the officers typically go, "Hey, DeEtte, this is so-and-so from such and such county. We're here on scene. I've got 7 horses I'm looking at. Vet is on the scene. Have the warrant being signed now. How soon can you get here?" Well, my team can deploy in 30 minutes. Transport time is an hour. What do you've got? Well, I have a brown horse. I have a brown horse. And I have this like colored thing. Okay, do you have any stallions? Well, possibly, or I don't know, or no, but typically it's I don't know.
Yes.
Male, female. So unfortunately, again, their understanding of being able to making these identifications of these horses can be challenging. So we had our new trailer retrofitted and built specially for stallions, because we always go into a seizure with some type of anticipation that there could be a hidden stallion somewhere.
Surprise, a little surprise.
A little.
Or more than one, maybe.
Well, we had one case where we had 5 come in.
Wow.
5 stallions. I'll talk about another case, big case at the end that had 100 horses and over 40 of them were stallions. So it is a common occurrence simply because castration can be costly and it can be something that an owner may not value. And if they're not feeding the horse appropriately or caring for it as it needs to be, castration is going to be at the bottom of the list. Backyard breeders, people who want to breed their mare or go out and get a stallion to breed their mares, very common. You have young stock, you have young unhandled colts oftentimes. So that is a common occurrence. Yes. Right. So this is just another example of our team being there to load horses. Sometimes, like I said, the officers are in there with us, haltering and leading. Other times it's all hands on deck for Days End. This is just another slide showing we do have MOUs, which are Memorandum of Understanding with counties. And that's just a written document that says, in the event that we work together on an equine related seizure or impoundment, this is Days End's role, responsibilities, duties, and commitment to you. And this is the county's role, responsibilities, and duties. And it establishes the parameters and the outline of how we're going to work together. And some of the things that could be in an MOU will be our team will do all the transporting, all the handling, catching, leading, handling, transporting. Our team, our organization takes on all the cost of care for the rehabilitation and treatment of these horses. Days End provides ongoing evidence, chain of evidence, and witness in court for prosecution. So those are types of things that can be defined in an MOU. That's really helpful, especially if we're called into an area in a community we've never assisted before. There can be misunderstandings and miscommunications unintentionally done, and we're in it, and the next thing you know, there was hey, I assumed that this is going to be handled in this way. And so life lessons learned through this industry is just to make sure that to have things in writing and have that fully established is there.
What I keep hearing, and you remind me of Rebecca Husted, whom I've had on several times, is that yes, we love horses, and in order to help them, you must follow a specific process, because that is how the law is going to deal with it, and how they're going to deal with what happens to this livestock.
Absolutely.
And so, as you know, I can see where some people might want to be so empathetic, but you must, in order to do right by the horse, follow the chain of process.
Yep.
So that there isn't a mistake where you lose control of that horse and it goes back to the owner.
Absolutely. Which has happened.
I'm sure.
Yes. And mistakes can be simply that, mistakes. It was an error. It was not an egregious or a intentional.
Yeah.
It was just a simple, I got the date wrong on the warrant. Legit, valid case thrown out. Address incorrect. The property owner had 2 addresses. When they wrote the warrant, they put 1 address on the warrant, and it wasn't the one that we were physically on.
Wow.
Those are small little details that absolutely have profound impact. So you're right. This process has to be viewed through that lens, which is primarily my duty and responsibility on behalf of Days End to work with the officers and the agencies. And then my team is there for the well-being and treatment care of the horses.
Right.
And so I cannot stress enough the team dynamic here, as well as the training and education required of them. These circumstances, Wendy, can be very hostile.
I was going to say, you could possibly have the owner there in your face while you're attempting to remove.
Most of the time they're there.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Well, they have to be present. They have to be served the warrant. But every agency and situation is different, whether or not they allow the owner to remain on the property while seizure is undertaken, or they sequester them and remove them. But no, we've been on very hostile scenes with multiple law enforcement officers, and owners needing to be detained and forcibly removed. This is a very emotional,
stressful,
very stressful. And it's, I think of it, we've even had plaintiffs that have just, we're taking their baby from that. This is their horse that they've had for 20 years that's been in their backyard that their grandkids ride on, and, tearful and emotional. So it
requires a level head, a well-oiled team, and a process.
It does. And trustworthy professionals to be able to do their job.
Right.
To enable us to do our job.
Right.
And so once the horses then arrive to Days End, these are living, breathing, physical evidence that we need to capture to the best of our ability to represent before a judge. I can't physically take these horses into court and, before and after.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
The horse now, and now look at the horse, 6 months down the line. So our protocols are all written. We have a standard operation procedure that we follow to the letter. Again, due process in our own right that we follow. We don't remove a burr from that mane. We don't pick a hoof. We don't do anything to that horse without getting photographs first. And then an examination. But here's some examples of what we provide and what we do. Identification again, so that will match and should match what the county identify, what their documents are from the scene, but we have our own separate documents that follow that horse. Anything that we put out there in media fundraising or things like that, all are permitted via the county. Oftentimes that's put in an MOU, but oftentimes I can call and seek verbal permission to go ahead and promote for fundraising purposes and sharing this. Sometimes the county themselves do a press release, and we'll have agencies here trying to follow the story. And other times the press are the ones that actually were the reason that the cases ended up in seizure. We had one case where someone leaked to the press a nasty situation, and they flew over with their helicopter and were filming on the nightly news the situation going on down below. So press is oftentimes involved with these, especially the more bigger egregious cases. We do a full exam for our veterinarian. Oftentimes, moments after they're removed, taken off the trailer, the vet meets us on the farm and starts their examination. We dictate all of their findings. It goes into a letter of discovery signed and documented by the vet, which is oftentimes the first piece of evidence that we give to the county and the state's attorney. They can help that coincides with the investigation documentation, can oftentimes set the course for prosecution and how to determine charges. That's also the document that our veterinarians will be subpoenaed into trial to testify to. So that's a very important, valuable piece of information and documentation. Every horse is put on its own specific rehabilitation plan, from refeeding to vaccinations to deworming to trimmings to dentals, you name it. That is all road mapped out and started from day one. And that's our refeeding protocol. Every temperatures or full vitals are taken 3 to 4 times a day, all documented. The amount of water drank, manure output, presentation of the horse. Is he dull, lethargic? Is he, anxious, pacing, pawing, dull, quiet, or normal, bright, alert, responsive, BAR. So all those things documented. That's staff involvement, volunteer involvement, intern involvement, everybody, all hands on deck.
Well, and unlike, okay, there's a stabbing, so now we have the evidence, we have the knife, and we're gonna put that in a bag and tag it and stick it on when it comes to trial, right? Here we've got something that breathes, eats, poops, and is a horse, and so you can't ethically leave it in the condition in which it was found to wait for the trial.
Correct.
Right. And that's
correct.
The thing. It's like, if you did not do all this incredibly thorough documentation, you get to the court 6 months later, this thing is shiny and fat and happy and healthy. And they're like, there is nothing wrong with this horse. You got to send it back.
Correct. And here's the other, the bloody knife. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
The other really important thing that we want to be able to show, Wendy, is that the care and treatment that went into these horses were standard. These horses did not go to Leesburg, Marion DuPont Medical Center to be critically cared for in their facility and receive IV fluids and, all of the bells and whistles of modern medicine. We fed them, we gave them water, and we started them on forage, which is hay, at a very slow refeeding rate. We monitored their response to that and then gradually increased caloric intake and volume of feed over a very particular specific amount of time. and made adjustments as needed. But ultimately, these horses got better because we gave them hay, we gave them water, we dewormed them, we gave them dental floats, trimmed their feet, and provided a calorie source in grain.
So you basically just met the minimum requirement as outlined in the document that you showed us previously with all the little tiny type, which is
Correct.
the minimal level of care required
Basic.
to not seize.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you don't
Quality
do
feed
anything
in sufficient
extraordinary.
quantity. Yes.
Right. In order to say it only took the basics to bring this horse back to health, even though we had to do it slowly. But it was minimal care that was required.
Absolutely. Correct. Which can be different for every animal, but a standard protocol.
Right.
Specifically for refeeding. And here's some really cool examples. This is just, I'm sorry, just a further definition of what that meant for the veterinary examination. This is an example of the photos that we provide to show the horses at entrance and as they're here without any change or modification externally. And then the follow-up, and the follow-up photographs can be either once they're through rehabilitation, done over healthy, physically body condition scores of 5 or above. They've had all of that care provided to them. They're fully vaccinated, fully dewormed, all that care has been provided. And now they're just maintaining and sustaining. Or we go to trial. The horse is not necessarily through rehabilitation and up to ideal weight, but here's what it looks like today at trial. Right. And the changes there. And we're standard in our angles that we take and the types of photos that we take. We do not edit them. We do not create any kind of special illusions to them. This can be a very challenging part of my job. Honestly, it's tough when you have pouring down rain and you need to get a picture of this emaciated horse, or the sun is so bright you can't see the gray horse for the forest. But anything that we can show a picture, an example of to the court is documented in a photograph. So this is an example of a before and an after.
Wow.
Yes. Before, same horse, after. So these are actual photographs that I submitted to the state's attorney for this horse. And he was a 17-ish quarter horse gelding out of West Virginia. If you know quarter horses, they rehab on air. He went chunk-a-monk fast. He was impounded mid-April. These pictures were taken in July, and we were cutting calories because the boy was going too far in the other direction. No extenuating circumstances. There were no other circumstance. There were no diseases, no illnesses, no infections. There was no lamenesses or pain associated with this horse that would have him in this condition.
Wow.
And so feeding him was all that was necessary. Now he was covered with lice and had a heavy parasite load, but again, basic care.
He looks like such a sweet guy too.
He's such a good, yeah, he's a well-loved pet. We believe that he was very sweet, very kind. His name is Murphy. He came from West Virginia in 2018 with a large number of horses, and he was a ranch horse. He's branded. Yeah. He was definitely a broke to ride, educated, trained horse who physically, once we got him under saddle, Wendy just wasn't comfortable. Yeah. His body wasn't comfortable carrying a rider anymore. So we did retire him to a companion and he was snatched up. Other just examples of what goes into our documentation and chain of evidence. I've already alluded to them, but what I haven't, cost of care is involved with that. I track all of the out-of-pocket veterinary costs that we incur, the cost of daily care and critical care rates really come out to be what is typical for a Maryland boarding facility. The cost of care can also include x-rays and lab work and blood work and things like that that we have done to those horses while they're in our care. Those before and after pictures that I just showed you. Oftentimes, if a horse dies in our care or dies in rehabilitation, counties will request necropsies be performed. So we will do that on behalf of the case and support them in that way. Those are all provided as well.
Is this the same horse, the X-ray? There is a shoe on that foot.
I believe the nails were still there. The shoe was gone, but the
Okay, that's what I can't tell from this picture, but wow. And then is the foot on the left, has it already had some cut off? It looks like.
No, that was the wear of her dragging it.
Oh.
So yes, as she would, honest to goodness, this mare broke over her. She would break over and then drag, or it would, as she would move around her stall, it would hit up against the stall sides and stuff. So yeah, this was the same mare that I showed a picture of being loaded on the trailer.
Right.
Her x-rays, unfortunately, look up from there when you see she had significant severe ring bone. Yeah. High ring bone that was fused. And it was our vet's assessment that it would actually be a form of torture to remove, to trim her feet and make any kind of angle changes to her, that she was beyond our help at that point.
Sad.
Yep.
Oh.
For your listeners to be able to understand process here, responding to the call of concern, investigation, documentation, veterinary involvement, case preparation, seizure, it's all on the plate of the animal control or humane agency and their officers. Once their reporting and their case as they have it is complete, then that goes to the state's attorney's office. Once it's with the state's attorney, it is then determined by the state's attorney, not the officers themselves, what charges should and will be pressed. Sometimes county, state's attorney's offices and agents, animal control, humane agencies can have a good dialogue and a communication and a relationship where they're working together on it. I've been involved with some cases where once that officer turns that documentation over, it is completely out of their hands and they're not even consulted with or have communication unless it's time to go to court and they're on the stand as a witness. So it always varies, but it may be a misunderstanding in the part of the public to know ultimately who's charging and prosecuting the owners of these horses, and that's the state's attorney's office. Most of equine related charges are misdemeanor: failure to provide proper food and water, failure to provide veterinary care, failure to provide proper space. That's mostly misdemeanor. Felony charges are more of your aggravated cruelty, your criminal level that requires the agency and the state's attorney to provide evidence that support intention, that person intended to create that kind of harm, or that the severity of the neglect or cruelty issued on the animal was so egregious that the horse was in significant pain and suffering, therefore that's felony level charges. So again, Little Quest, who had the 3-foot-long feet that you held, they went for felony charges with an understanding that that horse was going through significant long periods of suffering, having 3 feet long foot that weighed 30 pounds locked in a stall. So those decisions, knowing the law, for the state's attorney to know the law, to know the species, to know the animal, to know the material and the evidence that they're provided is huge.
Right.
And a whole nother lane for education, training, and outreach, and getting them more familiar with this type of situation and these types of material to be able to interpret what it is they're even reading and how that applies to the law and where and how could they win in court. I don't know if I'm making sense with all of
Yeah, yes, you are. The question, and maybe you're going to answer this a little later. The question I keep having is, okay, so if it's a misdemeanor and the person pays a fine, do they get their horse back?
Let's talk about outcomes.
Okay, because that's
Yeah.
where my brain's going is how then do you prevent this horse who is now looking like this lovely gray Arab from going back to that situation if it's only a misdemeanor? It's like,
correct. So this mare was a part of the same case that we were just saw, the foot picture. So I'm chronicling. This was another horse, a part of that, locked in a stall for all those years, seen by the utility worker. And you're right. So what does happen? Possible outcomes. So Wendy, it's the burden of the state's attorney to prove guilt. It's been my experience that most of the time these cases settle in some kind of plea agreement. If the presentation of the evidence is really well done, accurately as well as detailed, oftentimes that's enough for a plaintiff and their attorney to agree to a plea and not go to trial. And I would say that probably happens 90% of the time in our cases.
so in other words, they make a plea deal so they don't go to trial or jail. And then I would guess that part of that plea deal is that they release the horses.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, no, yes. So
you get custody.
yeah, the custody goes to the county gives it to us, but here's my normal spiel. The ultimate, so we already talked about the purpose and intent of the officer at that first conversation with the owner is to see if there's changes that can be made on behalf of the animal in its home. So similar, state's attorneys understand it's costly to go to trial. It's an expense and a cost. If the plaintiff has no criminal history, no background that they've found guilty of either a similar crime or have a long, history of criminal activity, the likelihood of jail time for an owner found guilty of misdemeanor failure to provide, violations is very, very low. And ultimately what's provided in the law is guide to say, this is the violation. If found guilty, this as a misdemeanor, it comes with standard outcome.
Right.
Fine, $1,000 per misdemeanor, $1,000 fine, 30 days in jail, and onwards. So those are just automatics. So those guide the attorneys in negotiating terms where the plea agreement gives them oftentimes very similar outcomes to what would be found at trial. So if a judge found them guilty, it's very similar to what a plea agreement can look like. Probation, forfeiture of animals, reinspection of your property by the officers or the county. Restitution can be a part of a plea agreement or guilty verdict. And inability to own an animal or have that species again in your care. But there's always a term. It's 3 to 5 years. And oftentimes if the attorneys can come together and mutually agree to that without a trial, that's a win
Right.
outcome. And to help your listeners understand too, that agreement that those attorneys can come to ultimately has to be approved of by the judge. So there is a hearing that's had, and whether it's a full-on trial or the attorneys are coming to the judge with the evidence, with their recommended plea agreement, and ultimately he signs it, accepts it, declines it, alters it, changes it, or, whatever. So I know that the court of public opinion can be very harsh when we see these shocking images and we see the suffering lived and experienced by these animals, that we really, as human beings, want to feel like justice is being served for them. And it's always the hardest question that comes to me, which is why no jail? Why were the owners let off or not duly punished for the suffering that they inflicted on their animals? And ultimately, when you look at it again, Wendy, through that legal lens and due process, by law, they were held accountable.
Well, and I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, but when you're watching TV and you see these commercials come on with these dogs suffering and the sad music and the voice that's so, I mean, I'm sorry, but they're preying on our emotions for us to give money. But when you see that commercial over and over and over again, when you hear of any kind of abuse, your first thing you go to is the starving dog and the, with the chain. And so there is an emotional component that is utilized.
Absolutely.
Right. And so
Absolutely.
when we see horses that have been abused, we're horse lovers, it triggers that same emotion. But we also have to think about as you say, justice is served. And the fact that they can't have horses, they can't have animals again, I'm not trying to justify what anyone has done to abuse an animal. And at the same time, people don't just go out intentionally to starve their horses and leave them in a stall like that. Circumstances happen, things happen that if we just put everybody in jail, now we'd be paying for all,
Correct.
Who's
Correct.
suffering there, and is that really justice? So
yes.
I totally hear what you're saying. And what I don't hear here, and I think what we're always missing is the rehabilitative piece that, if these people were required to come and volunteer at your facility for 6 months in order to see all these others and how to care for a horse and educate them on how to care for, maybe it would never happen again. Right?
Correct. And that is the ultimate goal and outcome worth seeking, is stop the cycle.
Right.
Prevent this from happening again. Absolutely. Whether that's through a plea agreement or guilty verdict and probation, or education, outreach. And we have actually had cases resolved where the judge has ordered the owner to go to classes, to go and learn, knowing that probation will be up in 5 years. You can get horses again. So what do you need? Or even psychiatric evaluation. That's
absolutely. I mean, that's so
seeing happen a lot in sentencing, a lot more than 10, 20 years ago. Wendy, is a trend that you're seeing. Mental illness and weakness in that area are very big, factor involved in these cases. So you're absolutely right. It is very rare that horses go back to owners. We have had some cases end with some horses going back due to what was worked out in an agreement and in a plea, with parameters around, the care of those animals and the ongoing monitoring and evaluation and assessment of them. I could say in my tenure with Days End, there was a point in time when we would say like it very rarely ever happened. But even in the last 10 years, we have had several result in horses returned. So it's never a done deal, and always interesting to learn the whys behind that. And ultimately you have a judge that's making these decisions on behalf of what he feels is correct and right. So you never say never around here.
Right. Do you have what's the word, recidivism?
Yes. I can't say that word, by the way. I'm glad you said it. I'm glad I can't.
Yeah, no, I had to really think about it. Okay.
You do. You can't just, that just doesn't roll. Well,
It does not roll. But what it means is repeat offenders.
Correct. Correct. To my understanding, to my experience for the equines, not that I'm aware of, but the dogs and cats, yes. Yes. And honestly, there's a case up here I'm coming to that I'll show you that will allude to that. But this is my horse, River, that you met. This was so this was him. This is him at intake. He was Howard County, Maryland. He and there were 5 horses total. He and 4 other horses were bought and ridden by a very wealthy man and his son, but a couple miles from our farm here. River was a 7-year-old Appaloosa gelding, body condition score 1, which is the lowest score on that chart you can be. And they were trail riding him in that condition. The local neighbor saw him coming off the trail being ridden, called animal control, fearful for his well-being. Animal control responded, saw the same thing, saw them riding River in this condition. The owner, the adult, the father, tried to blame the son, his minor son, for the care and condition of the horses. Ultimately, the county impounded them. They came to Days End, rehabilitated, and the rest of this, that was my life changing forever. But these are the officers. They come back to us every year. So this is River actually participating in one of their classes. So I owe my very happiness and heart horse and lifetime horse to them and their commitment to that due process and to their education and their learning and their willingness to intervene. And ultimately they won the case. It was a successful outcome at trial and the owner was held accountable. So kudos to them. I still get to see them when they come back to the farm for training. But that's just my own personal story and experience with this process and the people involved and committed to it. So this is honestly, Wendy, where I can go. I was just going to go into a little more storytelling on some cases, but I finished my formal
Yeah, and we're at an hour and a half. So I think we might save some of that. So, it'd be really fun to have you back and talk about some of your success stories.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what we'll do is we'll have you come back and we'll save those stories because it's really important for people to know you guys do incredible work and you have lots of success stories. And that, this is, again, it goes back to that commercial with the dog whimpering behind that we only see that side and they don't show us the success. But I think that the story for Days End is the success, is what you're doing to educate, to bring more people into understanding, to help these horses. And like your story with River, I mean,
yes.
it's
well,
it's
there's
the Black
so
Beauty
much,
story,
right?
isn't it? I mean, it's Black Beauty.
No, the human side. Yeah, we haven't even, we've talked about the professionals today. We've talked about the key ingredients to equine intervention for horses needing it due to cruelty and neglect and who those players are and their duties, roles, and responsibilities. But, we at DEFHR are about that horse-human connection and we didn't even touch on that. So the success stories is not even just bringing these horses back into a healthy state, but the humans that are here healing right alongside with them.
All right. So that's what we'll do. We'll have you come
Okay.
back and we'll talk about those stories because I think they need to be told.
Very good.
Yep. So just go ahead and unshare. Oh, perfect. All right. I mean, I find this, it's really good to understand the process. And, that's I so appreciate your ability to walk us through this because, when you see that horse, I know that there's one story where somebody finally put up a sign, my horse is sleeping because everybody called on it.
Yes.
But, if you see something, say something. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that there is a process in place and that there is training for these people. And so, it's okay. Don't worry. There's a process and it's a logical process. And the best thing you can do is make that phone call because
Absolutely.
you don't know and it's okay. And they're okay getting that phone call. I think that's really
Absolutely.
Come story.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, DeEtte, it's such a pleasure to have you back. And I've really enjoyed listening to this because it's really helped me understand the process.
Good.
Yeah, because, I didn't know. And I'm really looking forward to you coming back and telling us those success stories.
No, yeah, I got it already prepared. Love to. And I can't wait to see you again, Wendy.
All right. We'll have to make that happen.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you, everybody. And on Thursday, we're going to have Sarah. I forgot Sarah's last name. It's okay. But she's going to talk about fitting boots. And I sure wish I had that webinar about a month ago because I had to fit boots for my horse and I'm not sure I got the right time. So join us on Thursday. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot and take care. Bye.